Hi friends, you're tuned in to Legal Means Business, a podcast by Leeway. We're joined by some amazing guests who help us identify how to take your legal function and career to the next level. I'm your host, Steph Smith, and we're talking all things legal ops and legal tech, as well as other critical skills needed to help you thrive in the evolving in-house arena. Don't forget, you can watch us on YouTube or listen on the go through Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you enjoy the conversation, please do hit subscribe and let us know what you think on social.
I think legal's the perfect place to be disruptive. And I say that in a nice way, don't disrupt everything and don't do illegal things. But I think the law firm world is easily disrupted. The in-house world is relatively easily disrupted as well. And I think that means that you have the opportunity to make good trouble and to sort of raise the bar of what legal should be and have a point of view. I mean, this is something I talk about a lot, and this is not necessarily just with legal. It's you gotta have a point of view. And I say that in the sense of we have an internal meeting and somebody comes with a problem. My biggest pet peeve is when you don't have a suggestion or a solution.
Let's face it, legal traditionally hasn't been the business's favourite team. But thanks to developments in legal operations, legal tech, and of course with mindsets, legal teams are increasingly delivering significant business value. That said, it can be a bit of an uphill battle if your business isn't open to receiving this new era of legal support. So how can in-house lawyers build this legal brand internally? I'm excited to be exploring exactly this in today's episode with Andy Dale. Andy is the General Counsel and Chief Privacy Officer at AI-powered B2B gifting platform Alyce. And he's also the co-host of the Data Protection Breakfast Club podcast, presented by TechGC. With well over a decade of in-house experience, Andy is well-versed in what it takes to position your legal department in a way that enables you to deliver the best outcomes. And you'd be surprised how much easier it is to make an impact when the business views legal as a trusted partner. So without further ado, let's find out how to build the legal team's brand internally. Well, hi Andy. Thank you for joining us on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm good. You? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, not at all. Delighted to have you. And I was just saying to you before we hit record that your setup is absolutely brilliant with from your own podcast.
It's been really fun. We got this equipment from our friends at TechGC who help us with the podcast, and we're all pros here.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, considering that we are the Legal Means Business podcast, we do quite like to start off by exploring what you believe is the role of legal in business.
Big question.
Yeah.
I think probably like a lot of people, my take on that topic has changed over the years as I've gotten through different jobs and done different things. I think when I first joined a law firm, it's a very different answer than when you actually go and work in a company. And when I was in a law firm, it was very transactional. Let me help you with this problem. And so I felt very sort of on the sidelines and trying to be helpful, but not necessarily knowing what their business would be like. And once I got into a company, I understood really quickly that you have to learn the business first. The legal work is arguably secondary to the work that's happening. So if you understand your business really well, it started to become clear to me that that makes me a better lawyer. Not necessarily knowing the answer to things, because I'll never know the answer to things. And so I think the role of the lawyer is to deeply understand the business, synthesize those goals into the challenges or advantages that the law brings, and then help push the business forward that way.
Yeah, totally. No, I love that outlook on it as well, because I mean, I don't know in your experience what the kind of onboarding of a lawyer is in an in-house context. But I suppose generally when you join a business in any role, you do spend part of that induction phase learning about the business, about the values, about the different teams, etc. And I guess that's really important and probably not something you're so used to if your only experience has been in a law firm, I suppose.
It's very different. And when I joined DataZoo, which was an ad tech company, that particular technology is exceedingly confusing. And so I was told by all the people, it's going to take you a while to understand this and how it works. And luckily, I had people that were willing to sit with me and whiteboard it and draw it and show data flows and where data is going. And like, and so then I tried to pay that forward and do that for everyone I hired. And I do that, you know, whenever I get the opportunity to have other people on a team with me, I make sure that a big part of their onboarding is talking to other people in the business, understanding what their roles are, and understanding the actual technology and what it actually does, or the actual service we provide, or what products we provide. So that's the foundation to me. And I think you have to push for it a little bit. And so you have to ask for it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a good point, actually, because what's your opinion on how legal tends to be seen within the business?
Yeah, that's changed too over time, I think. And I think for the better. It used to be, you know, there used to be a sort of this standard path to the GC, which would be either you're their outside counsel on the corporate side, and then you decide, I'd like to go work for this company, or then the company decides we'd like you to come work for us. And that just changed over time. That changed, and now there are multiple paths inside. And so I think that has shifted and changed the role and perception of what legal is inside the business. People are joining at a younger age. People are skipping law firms and going right in-house. That's clearly a thing. Whereas 15 years ago, that wasn't happening really. It was really like the path is law school, law firm, in-house, and not necessarily deviating from that pattern. And that has changed a lot. So what that means is sort of what we were talking about before. It allows that person to get into the business much earlier and understand exactly what the business is trying to achieve on the ground. And so I think then that leads that lawyer to being more involved, more proactive, seen as the department of enablement instead of the department of, hey, that's risky. Yeah. Let's not do that. Or instead, let's problem solve together. And so from my perspective, your brand as a lawyer inside the company is really important. And that means establishing culture. What is the culture of legal in this company? If you have a lot of data or privacy or security issues, put those at the forefront. This is something we care about a lot. All of this is to put yourself out there as a legal team that is literally working in lockstep with the business and not in the corner, you know, reading an erudite book and then lobbing a memo over a fence and saying, okay, well, good luck, everybody. You know, that's the opposite of what you want.
Yeah, for sure. And you spoke about there how kind of building the brand of legal internally and creating that kind of legal culture is a way to make this shift to better in-house legal. What does it mean to you to build that brand internally?
I think establishing day one that you're there to help and that you're there and accessible. So many legal teams that I've seen or heard about from people, it comes with the territory of large companies sometimes, which I've also been in, where you can't be as responsive and you can't be as proactive. You have a million things and there's just literally a queue of, a queue of things that you need to try to get to. So you can't be as proactive as you'd like. But that's one thing that people say. But I actually think it's not true. And I think that needs to change. When I was working at TD Ameritrade, we were multiple thousand person company, public company, with a pretty lean legal team for the size of our company. We probably only had 35 lawyers in the business. And a company of that size today would have 3x the number of lawyers. So we operated lean, and that meant that we needed to focus on certain things and we would push things outside, but it allowed us to we were able to still be accessible to the business and still make our strategic value known by going and talking to people and being accessible and being available. And I think those are the things that I view as critical, like setting that culture that we're here, we're partner, we're strategic.
And you're so right. I think especially almost no matter what size your legal function is, there's always that push for, doing more with less type situation. And there's so many different ways that we're seeing people doing that, whether it's adopting legal tech or we had someone on the podcast recently talking about distributed ownership. So trying to empower other teams to deal with legal matters that they're best suited to, I suppose, which is quite interesting. So there's lots of different things that legal teams are trying to ease the burden of the legal workload, I suppose, which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Having a tech stack is important. But I think, running a legal department at any size certainly involves like understanding what your budget is going to be and how you forecast that spend is really important.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about that is I do that every year. I like sit down with finance. I forecast what our budget is going to be. I think about where we're going to spend money, but legal cost and legal expense and legal problems, they just come up. And so like you can forecast pretty well, but nailing that number is very difficult. Right now there are so many unpredictable things. I didn't predict there would be a war. So now there's a war that actually has impact on my business. I guess I could have foreseen you reading an article and you're thinking this could happen, but I don't tie that directly to my budget. I can't. I don't have the foresight. I can't look into a crystal ball and say we're going to acquire 3 companies. I can't look into a crystal ball and say we are or not going to get sued. So there's this tendency to set a number, but then that number gets obliterated. And so then it's this very difficult dance with finance and with the business to say, what are we doing? What are we not doing? What are we focusing on? How do we move things around? And how do we still achieve our goals? Yeah,
for sure. So you obviously have quite a good relationship, it sounds like, with finance and the like. So I guess for yourself at Alyce, how have you and how do you go about building this internal brand of legal?
It's a good question. I think those connections are really important that you mentioned. Some people view the CEO as the most important connection, especially if that's who they're working for. I think that connection is important, but I wouldn't stratify it with the CEO at the top. I would say there's a level that's kind of all the same, and it includes the CEO. And if you're in a tech company, the CTO is a very important relationship to have. So the technology, the CEO, and sales. And 1A is product, because I think product connects tech and sales. And so I think you really need to be sitting with all of those. Not to say that my relationship with the head of people or the CMO is any different, but I think for establishing legal culture, those other ones come first. Especially if you're in a sales-driven organization, that can be key, that sales relationship, because sales and legal have this perception of a fraught relationship, and I just think that's garbage. I don't think it has to be that way.
Yeah, totally. And bringing it completely back to basics, how do you go about building these relationships?
Some of it's
luck. It might seem like a silly question, but I know it's a bit of a challenge for some.
Some of it's luck. I think some of it is stuff that I picked up over time, over the years. When I worked at TD Ameritrade, one of the company was headquartered in Omaha, but one of the biggest offices was in Jersey City, right outside of New York. And so that's where a lot of my internal business teams were working. So I traveled there frequently, and I just showed up. When we had certain meetings, I showed up for them. When we had people that I had done deals with, I walked up to them and I had coffee with them in their office. I didn't walk into their office and say, I'd really like to establish a key relationship with you right now, because I think it'll drive our careers professionally. But, I how's your dog? How was your commute today? Do you want to get coffee? What's bothering you today? What's really great about your team right now? Like just little things like that. That's really important. That's a big reason I joined Alyce. I mean, Alyce is about personal connections, and I just really believe in that, at my core, because that like proved itself valuable to me early on in my career. And when I worked with people in the business, at Ameritrade, I did a lot of vendor contracts, big vendor deals, and we had a procurement team, and I worked with them on some of these deals. And inevitably, the folks on the procurement team that got up from their desk and went to people's offices, that like got on the phone, actually flew out and met people, well, they did better. And they made better relationships, and it just allowed them to be better at their jobs. And so I think I'm not espousing any great wisdom here, but I think making those actual personal connections really matters. And then some of it is luck. At my last company, I sat right next to the CTO. I mean, that was lucky. And we just were able to organically raise boom, boom, boom. Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Why did that happen? And that kind of stuff. I sat like one pace from the CFO, like that. Those are the things. And that's why it works, I think. I think the culture of tech companies in general, having open floor concept and being in offices together, things are different now with people being remote. So there's different challenges, but back then, I think a big thing to do was sort of just turn and tap someone on the shoulder and solve a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think you're totally right. Like the value of just basic human relationships can't be underestimated. And I think especially probably for the legal team, because obviously there's a bit of a perception that there's quite a barrier between legal and the rest of the business. So I think when people get to know you on a personal level, it completely annihilates the perception that some people may have from, stereotypes or the way things maybe traditionally were. So totally don't think the human relationships can be underestimated.
Well, that must be something you're dealing with as well, right? I mean, I think there's some of what you said is totally right about legal and maybe but you could say the same thing about engineers. And you could say the same thing about others. And so I think like we are missing some of that. I think there's a balance that we're going to find.
Yeah.
I think everybody, at least in the US, working too hard, going into the office too much, working all hours of the day. And I think some separation has been really nice. And we've had to work hard to maintain the culture and maintain the connections that we have with people. But in an optimal world, like we could see each other in person a day or two a week and still be really productive at home.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally with you. And you're right. It's completely all the different teams. And I think, remote working does present a few challenges to break down those barriers. If you're generally only working on work matters with the teams that you work with, it can be a challenge. But I'm seeing companies are certainly breaking down those barriers for sure, even in a remote culture. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, it's obviously important to build relationships with stakeholders across the business. Strong relationships make it easier to work with people, and they'll be more inclined to want to work with you, creating less friction between them and the legal department. Despite the rise of remote work, it's still possible to build strong relationships. Here are 5 quick tips. 1. Build personal connections. Get to know your stakeholders and what their interests are both inside and outside of work. 2. Be positive. We all have that colleague who's just a joy to work with, so be that person. 3. Be honest. Never overpromise or underdeliver when it's within your power. 4. Attend other teams' meetings. This will help you absorb relevant information and contribute helpful insights when appropriate. 5. Always aim for a win-win solution. Use everything you know about your stakeholder to balance your legal desires with the business motivations. And in terms of accomplishing this, building a great legal brand internally, what kind of mindset and approach do you need, I suppose? Because from my perspective, I'm seeing I'm lucky enough to speak to lots of cool in-house legal people such as yourself. And I do kind of get an aura that you're all very enthusiastic and great and forward thinking and progressive and things like that. So I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts on what kind of mindset is needed to build this internal brand successfully.
Well, you know how in startup culture they talk about being disruptive? I think legal's the perfect place to be disruptive. And I say that in a nice way, don't disrupt everything and don't do illegal things. But I think the law firm world is easily disrupted. The in-house world is relatively easily disrupted as well. And I think that means that you have the opportunity to make good trouble and to sort of raise the bar of what legal should be and have a point of view. I mean, this is something I talk about a lot. And this is not necessarily just with legal. It's you got to have a point of view. And I say that in the sense of we have an internal meeting and somebody comes with a problem. My biggest pet peeve is when you don't have a suggestion or a solution. We had an issue that I raised this week with our leadership team. I said, this is an issue. I'm calling it out again. This is a big issue. I've mentioned this issue before. I'm mentioning it again. And here's what I'm going to do about it. I'm going to create a series of slides and come back to you with come back to this group with recommendations. To me, that's your opportunity as a lawyer. It's probably your opportunity anywhere in the business, but that's your opportunity. Have a point of view. What's the point if you don't have a point of view? And I think some lawyers are afraid to have a point of view, especially law firm lawyers. And the ones that I ultimately choose to work with have a take and they have an opinion. They don't tell me what to do, and they're careful. But those that get in the room and bat it around and have the discussion together, like that's where you win. And that's our opportunity as lawyers to be different. And I think that's I do think there's a sea change, and I think it's happened and it's continuing to happen. And so I think you'll see more law firms react to this too and show up in different ways. Already, one of my soft requirement is that I can text my outside counsel. That sounds little, but it's not. I can't tell you how many law firms are like, please don't text us. Attorney-client privilege rules and blah, blah, blah. I get it. If I'm in a litigation, I'm not going to text you. Okay. I get it. I'm not going to do that. But if I have a one-off thought in my mind that I want to go back and forth with you, that's where I am. Meet me where I am.
And from your experience, what does a good legal brand internally look like? And I suppose maybe another question would be, and would the company agree as well?
I'm totally biased, but my company would agree. I think my last 4 companies would agree, and that's not to say that's about me, but the things that I've learned over time and put into place, I think they create for a pretty good legal culture, and it creates advocates. So when something is said on LinkedIn, I've had salespeople actively talk about us on LinkedIn or other platforms or on Slack internally about how we helped them be a part of the team. When I joined DataZoo, it was the first sales culture I had been a part of, and we were working on a deal with a big concert promotion company, and we closed this deal, and I remember there was a gong. Somebody rang the gong, and everybody was celebrating and high-fiving, and they sought me out to be part of the high-fiving. And that was not something I was used to as a law firm attorney at all. Not at all. And not even at Ameritrade either. We didn't we first of all, we were distributed highly, but still we didn't high five each other after deals, And so that was oh, I can practice law this way. I can actually be on the team. And that takes me back to youth sports. It takes me back to, camping trips with my friends, all of that camaraderie and that stuff, that ended up really fueling what I want to create and what I want to continue to create for legal. And it makes those times when you have to make a withdrawal easier, because it's like an emotional bank account. You fill up the emotional bank account, and then occasionally I have to say, hey, like, this idea is totally messed up. Like, we can't do this. And I need the people to be like, oh, this team is on our team. They're not throwing this idea out because that's their nature. There's a reason. And then you get in a room and you explain the reason, or you get on a call and you walk through, like, this is why this is really risky. So risky so that I'm saying we should stop. But then you have to be open to the idea that someone's going to come back at you and say, what if we did it this way? What if we did it this way? Are you sure? Are you sure this risk outweighs the benefit? And then you have to have an open conversation.
Totally. The reason I asked actually whether the company would agree was because, as you were saying, I'm seeing more and more on LinkedIn and the likes of other teams talking about how great their relationship with legal is. And I just think it's fantastic, and it's great to see it going that way. But I guess it shows that it is a movement, the fact that they're surprised.
It's another disruptor, right? It's unexpected. And it's unexpected. And what's funny about it is that it's so easy. It's so easy to be kind and open and talk to your team about why you think things. But for some reason, people just don't invest in it enough.
Part of building a strong legal brand internally is about aligning yourself to the ambition of the business and evidencing this through action. Often, this means legal teams need to be more disruptive. And to be disruptive, you firstly have to think outside the box. Don't be constrained by the way things have always been done, and instead challenge conventional legal thinking. Secondly, be confident in sharing your point of view. You have significant value to offer, so share it. Then, be open to a back and forth conversation with your business colleagues. They might challenge your advice, you might challenge their preferences, but it's likely that between you, you'll find an even better solution. And on that note, lastly, always come armed with a solution. If you present an issue to the business, be sure to clearly explain the size of the challenge and offer a way forward. Yeah, totally. And from a kind of business impact point of view, what are the kind of benefits that could result from a better internal legal culture and legal brand internally?
I think what happens is when you build a good brand and then you have to make asks and you explain why you're making those asks, purely from a GC perspective, you get more of what you need. And so what I need salespeople identifying that these 5 things are incredibly not good for the business. So we need to work to avoid those. And these other things over here are less important. That's okay. If I establish that, then we're getting good contracts and we're getting consistency across our contracts. So as a GC and the legal team inside, one big thing you want when it comes to contracts is consistency. When someone goes to inspect those, do a round of financing, look at your documents, you're going public, you're selling a company, whatever. When that big company moment comes around, your consistency around the deals you've been doing is very important. Your consistency with your approach to compliance. Have I been looking at things and documenting them? Have I shown my work? And that involves other teams, right? That can't just be legal. So it's all sort of in one big bucket of give and get.
It feels like with this amazing internal legal brand, not only are you becoming part of their teams, but they're wanting to get involved with legal and more proactively, less than, stop trying to push legal away and kind of welcome it in earlier on as well, perhaps.
That happens a lot. That happens a lot in certain areas of the business. And I think like when you're in a tech company, I can speak to this specifically in a tech world where there's a lot of data privacy and data security issues. You need champions in the business outside of legal, people that are inherently interested in those issues, think they're important and can help you drive those issues forward in the business. So that's critical. Like you've got to have those people and you've got to nurture them. And so we do that we have a separate Slack channel called Privacy Champs. I took like a bunch of us went on a hike and went for ice cream, and we're chatting about privacy a little, but we're also like going on a hike and having ice cream with people. Like it's just simple. it sounds simple, right? But it's how do you build that advocacy inside the business? Well, like you make a bond with someone, and then you go solve a really hard problem together. And I think that's what does it. It happens in product a lot. It's harder to get sales advocacy, so you have to work harder. And to get that done, you actually have to help them understand why they'll close the deal faster. I think that helps.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Articulating that business value for sure is always a great one, especially when there's a monetary value attached to it, I think, for the sales team, huh?
Yeah.
That's so cool, though. If you're, using ice cream as a carrot on the end of a stick, I'm sure lots of people will be happy to get involved.
Yeah, it's fun.
And did you handpick these privacy champions, or how does that sort of thing come about?
Good question. Some of them raise their hand, and then you nurture. Like, hey, you should look at this article. You should, check out this thing, or here's my take on this issue. What's your take on it? Ad tech is really interesting for privacy. Health is interesting. So maybe there are things we can talk about. So I try to nurture some of those things, and some of them, it's just they for the most part, people are really willing to be interested. I think if you tee it up in a way that's relevant to them, then that part is pretty easy. So, for example, my deputy general counsel and myself, we met with our head of product recently, and we're in the process of onboarding 3 or 4 really critical vendor relationships, where those vendors will tie into the platform. So it's not just like the food vendor. It's something different. It's a tech partner. And so we were on a call with her, stepping through why these relationships are so critical from a legal perspective. She knows why they're critical from a product and technical perspective. She vetted those vendors and picked them. And then it's incumbent upon us to have a conversation with her about, like, these are the things that are going to be really important contractually, legally, going forward. And so it's incumbent upon us to, like, proactively have that conversation and pull that champion out that way.
Yeah, totally. That makes total sense. I'm hearing people I'm speaking with having more and more success as well, building relationships by almost asking non-lawyers their opinions on legal matters, especially when they're, like, maybe closer to the context of whatever it is that they're working on, and kind of building the relationship from there, which I think is quite a cool idea as well.
Yeah. Do you get asked that? Has that happened to you?
Maybe not myself. No, I'm more hearing it from people, I guess, maybe in slightly larger, I guess the people that tend to tell me that are quite scale-ups, I would say, when they're really being pushed to move faster and really need the buy-in of other teams to help kind of tie everything together and integrate legal into processes, I suppose.
It's interesting. I think you need it at every size. Having been at multiple sizes, I've been through this scale up, and that's right. You do need, I need product to lean in hard on certain things. I need engineering to lean in on building a privacy feature. Like, that's true. But I also think you need it from a content perspective, especially if your business has anything that legal can amplify, that your being good at legal can amplify your business in any way. Yeah. That's a partnership with content. That's a partnership opportunity.
Yes. Yeah. That said, yes, we do a lot around GDPR and the like. So I suppose, yes, I do. Yeah, that's a great point.
But you're probably doing it. You're probably doing it from a strategic angle, right? Like, it's not just, hey, we're good at GDPR. That's, at this point, I would hope from a lot of companies, that's a dime a dozen. What's really important is we're good. We've accomplished some things. We have a program. But here's why that program serves our customers.
Yeah, for sure. And we've got a really great lawyer working with us to always ensure GDPR's compliance and all that. But yeah, we have been talking about things of how we can. There's such an opportunity for businesses to go above and beyond, I think. And I think lawyers are helping businesses realize that, and it's such an opportunity. So we'll hopefully be capitalizing on some of the above and beyond parts of the law as well, I guess, which is
preach on. Preach.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that's about all I was hoping to cover with you today. I don't know if you have any final comments on anything at all, really, but of course referring to, around internal brand as well.
Just appreciate you having me on. Fun conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Really appreciate your time and your expertise and sharing all your experience and insights. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.